Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the late night edition of the Sports Beat with Richard Holdridge, presented by Georgia Alabama Sports Live. I hope that you are having an incredible evening. If you were watching the Georgia Alabama Sports Live show, we did have a Calvary volleyball game. We had the Harris County Coaches Show, and we also had the Calvary Coaches Show. So joining me on the show for a special episode is because, we got high school football, college football. I couldn't think of a better guest to bring on. Nobody covers the wiregrass like Phillip Jordan. Phillip, welcome to the show. You're muted. All right, gotcha.
There's probably a lot of people that wish I would get muted sometimes, Richard, with some of my takes. But good to be here. Always happy to jump on, talk, wherever direction you take us. I should have a take on, especially the college football season, SEC, coming up this weekend.
Well, I do want to start with high school football because you covered Dothan. I mean, you had the Rehoboth coach on. I know that Glenwood plays Elba, and they're considered the wiregrass just outside of Enterprise. What is unique about covering the wiregrass? What makes the wiregrass area so special when it comes to high school football?
So, we got two 7A teams in Dothan and Enterprise in the area. And obviously they get a lot of attention. And then now Rehoboth moved from 5A to 6A. So now we have a 6A team. So, hey, I have to keep up with 6A for the first time in a few years now. But it's the smaller communities, I think, that really make the wiregrass great. The teams in 1A, you mentioned Elba. 2A, there's a lot of them in 2A Region 2. 3A, 4A, 5A, the smaller communities, because those communities really like on Friday nights. That's the big thing in their towns. Is go to the high school football game, a lot of energy. Even when maybe a season's not going the way a team maybe hoped, those fan bases, those towns still come out and support those schools. So that to me always stands out, and that's one of the things I like about what I do at a Wiregrass High School Football Report, talking to these coaches, especially at those smaller area communities, because like I said, those communities get behind those teams, and it's the biggest thing in town on those Friday nights.
And the team that you cover the most, you are the producer for 96.9 The Legend, which is the flagship station for Dothan Wolves football. Having a pretty good season so far. They will actually travel across the state lines to take on the Golden Tornadoes of Monroe. I'm very familiar with Monroe out of Albany. Are you looking forward to this border matchup between a public school in Georgia that you probably haven't faced yet? I mean, this is just right across the state lines, and over there in Albany, the Golden Tornadoes from Monroe, which I think they are 3A. I don't know if they were in 4A. 3A last year because they were in the same region with Carver and Columbus. But what are you looking forward to about this matchup with Monroe?
It's going to be interesting going on the road. Dothan's first road matchup. Of course, this is the second game of the year. It's a big matchup, too, before Dothan. I ain't going to sit here and say I know a lot of Monroe because I don't. I know Dothan's going to Albany. It will be, I will say this, if it's okay for me to do this quick plug. If you are wanting to listen, because you can always go to the 96.9 The Legend app, wherever you are, or the website. Let's do it. We normally go on there at 6:45, kick off at 7. Different this week because of that, because they're going to Georgia. We'll go on the air at 6:15 and with pregame, and then the game will go at 6:30. But I just look forward to see how Dothan plays. 27-7 against Childs out of Florida, school from Tallahassee. Jaden Barnes had a big game, hit 2 touchdowns, 1 of 3 yards, 1 of 70. Just kind of see how Dothan does. You always have that improvement between the first game and the second game because, Richard, the following week is a big rivalry game, Region 2 matchup. Dothan and Enterprise will play the next week. So it's kind of one of the things where Dothan, you want to come out. It's a non-region game, of course. No injuries. You want to look good. You want to play well. Have that momentum going to that big game Enterprise that will be played at Ripue Stadium in Dothan the following week. But that's just kind of things I'm just looking at with that. It's, and we will be there will be a coaches show. So you can hear me talk about it all you want. But on Thursday night on 96.9 The Legend at 8 o'clock, you will hear Dothan Wolves head coach Jet Kennedy talk with Jerry Coleman and Ken Lambert about the upcoming matchup too as well. So little plugs there. I'm using your show to plug our stuff, but those are some good places to check it out. And of course, if you want to hear Coach Kennedy talk about it.
Well, I'm also going to plug the teams in the Chattahoochee Valley that Dothan will play this season. They will face Central at Dothan on September the 13th. They will also face Opelika. That's going to be on October the 4th. But then they will have to travel to TC Brittenfield Panther Stadium to take on Smith Station on October 18th, and then go to the Duck in Auburn to take on the Auburn Tigers on October the 25th. So, yeah, Dothan in the same region with Central, Smith Station, Opelika, and Auburn. And, of course, you've got Enterprise, the battle for the Wiregrass. Enterprise was projected to be picked second in Central's region. But from what I saw in week 1 with Central, they beat Pinson Valley 61-14. And if you know history about Pinson Valley, Phillip, this is the old school that Coach Patrick Nix used to coach for when Bo Nix was winning state championships and breaking passing records. And so I think the schedule makers purposely scheduled this game because it was Coach Nix's former team. But yeah, and this is a bias, being covering high school football in the Chattahoochee Valley, I strongly feel that Central is the best team in Alabama, any classification. I'll put them up against Saraland. I'll put them up against Thompson. I'll put them up against the best of the best in Alabama, and I think they're one of the best teams in the country.
Well, me, Jerry, and Ken constantly have a conversation on this, and we all agree that 7A Region 2 is the toughest region of all the classifications in the state. Because Central, and then you got Auburn. And it seems like that's the thing. When you look at this region, you can always pencil in Central and Auburn. They're going to be playoff teams. So, of course, we know that only 2 more get in from the region. Dothan's one of those teams that fights for spot. Enterprise, that's why that game in a few weeks is going to be so big between those two, because it's playoff positioning. Then you could, and Carver should be really good this year with what they have, the merger of the 2 schools there in Montgomery with them and Lanier. And then also Opelika. They're a solid team, new head coach. So, some changes there with them. Unfortunately, the other 2, I know one of them you covered, Smith Station. And I think it's going to be sadly, it'll just the way it looks, kind of what we saw from last week. Going to be a problem. It's a rebuilding there with what they got going on at Smith Station. But it feels like you've got 3 or 4 teams fighting for 2 spots, and it was that way before. Prattville, when they were in the region, which of course they're still 7A, but they're in another different region. They're no longer in Region 2, but it's just. And Coach Kennedy talks about it all the time. He says 7A Region 2 is the SEC of 7A.
Another team that you cover down in the Wiregrass, Rehoboth. You mentioned they are in 6A, in the same region with Russell County, which I think Russell County, after beating Carroll 32-0, they are the most improved team in 6A. They got one of the top quarterbacks in the state in Bryson Riggins. They will take on Eufaula this Friday. Eufaula's kind of in the Wiregrass. I'll make sure to give you a shout out. I will be on the call for Georgia Alabama Sports Live. Later on in the season, they will take on Rehoboth. But, you got to take on Wetumpka and Pike Road. 6A is no walk in the park. When you look at the top teams in 6A, you think of Miguel Tulin, you think of Clay Chalkville, you think of Saraland. When you look at Rehoboth in 6A, how do they match up with these teams in 6A, and what can Rehoboth do to try to sneak in and get one of those playoff spots?
Well, I've had Coach Green on the show twice. We talked in the preseason, and of course, I had him on this week after they had that double overtime win against Ashford, 4A Ashford. And they're a young team offensively, new quarterback. They've got some good players on at running back. Tevin James is his name. He had a big game there against Ashford. He had a big run down the sideline, 55-yard touchdown. Um, but and then now they're playing Carroll this week, which for them is a familiar foe because they were both in the same region last year. So y'all look for Rehoboth starting out 2-0 before you go into region play is going to be big. They're a team that had a slow start last year, but they won most of their games toward the end of the year. I think they maybe lost one game in the second half of the year. So they went into the offseason with momentum. And Toby Green's a really good coach. So he's been around the area. He helped build Northside Methodist, get them going when they moved from AISA. And I'm going to throw it way back for you, Richard. I am from Cottonwood. That's where I graduated, 2005, 2A Region 2 school. He had 2 undefeated regular seasons when he was at Cottonwood. Now, he came in a year or 2 after I graduated, but for a good solid almost 10 years there, Cottonwood was one of the better teams in 2A, special Region 2. They were always competing for a region title. So he has a track record in this area in the Wiregrass of winning. So he's going to have Rehoboth ready in these games. And he talked about on the show too. They had some turnovers and some penalty issues that you see in first games that he really feels like they can clean up going into this week. And they just said they'll be fine. I think Rehoboth is in a good spot. So it's an adjustment, 6A Region 2, obviously, but I think they're gonna be fine. Down the road, they'll be fine.
All right, Philip, let's switch gears and let's talk some college football. I mean, technically, we did have some college football games, but
No,
it's
Richard.
really week one.
It
It's
does
week
not
one.
count. It does not count until the SEC starts playing. Come on now.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, I think it's just an extension of week one because there is no week
I agree.
zero. Because Jake Crane says there ain't no week zero. Just like pre-boarding, there's no pre-boarding. He definitely think that Georgia Tech made a statement beating Florida State. I thought that Florida State was overrated. But we get into these matchups in week one. I mean, I'm looking at some of the matchups that I definitely want to sit down on the couch and watch. The 12 o'clock kickoff between Georgia and Clemson, of course, I'm going to watch that. The 3:30 kickoff, I think Florida, Miami, that's the one that is got my interest the most. I think Notre Dame, Texas A&M, and is going to be another game. But is there a game that you definitely have got your eye on that you're like, I definitely want to watch this because I've been looking forward to this matchup?
Well, you mentioned one of them, Florida, Miami. That is a big matchup for both programs because you've got two coaches in Mario Cristobal at Miami and then Billy Napier at Florida. Both are going into the third year. A lot of people expect a lot out of them. And one thing, Mario Cristobal is horrible in late game situations. We've seen that. Now they bring in Cam Ward. I like their receivers. I think their two receivers are two of the best 5 in the ACC. But Florida needs this because Florida can't go 0-1. They cannot start that way because when you look at the back half of their schedule, I don't have it in front of me, but it is tough. It is a gauntlet that they're going to go through. Florida cannot have this game go the wrong way. They cannot afford a loss here. They've got to win. And actually, I know we're recording this on Tuesday evening. Before we got on, I finished recording my show that will drop on Wednesday, and I just went with who needs this game more. Florida needs it more, and I think it's going to be a fun game. We'll see. I kind of don't trust Mario Cristobal either, but I think Billy Napier needs this. The two coaches in the SEC that are on the biggest hot seat, in my opinion, are Billy Napier and Sam Pittman at Arkansas. And if Florida loses this one, I don't know. I think Florida fans are going to be. I don't say that they're not obviously going to fire him after it, but I really think there's going to be a lot of heat and pressure on him. So this is a must win for Billy Napier. Um, you know, Looking at, I'll tell you a game that's going to be quite interesting. Vanderbilt, Virginia Tech, 11 o'clock. A lot of people are high on Virginia Tech going into this year, and now what we saw at Florida State in the opener, and I don't think Clemson's going to be great. I think Georgia's going to beat them by 2 or 3 scores. Virginia Tech look like a solid team, and what's Vanderbilt going to be? I mean, Vanderbilt's probably going to be the worst team in the conference in the SEC. But they bring in the quarterback from New Mexico State that beat Auburn last year. Pretty much, his offensive coordinator came with him. His head coach came with him. We'll see what happens there. But that's an intriguing matchup, an important matchup. And I'll say this: I think the game in the SEC that has the biggest opportunity to be like that shocking moment, like, wow, I can't believe that team beat this team. Old Dominion at South Carolina. South Carolina's a 21-point favorite in that one. We don't know what the quarterback situation will look like. No Spencer Rattler anymore. I'm not really sure. Is South Carolina going to be good? I mean, I don't know. I don't think so. Old Dominion, Sun Belt. We'll see. I think that's a very dangerous game for South Carolina. So I would pay attention to that one.
And some of the teams locally, we talked about Clemson and Georgia. I'm just looking forward to it because I think that Georgia's not going to have a cupcake. They should win this game, but Clemson still has some players. They're just not at the level they were when they were a national championship contender about 10 years ago. The local teams here, Alabama's facing Western Kentucky, and Phillip, a familiar face, has been named the starting quarterback at Western Kentucky. You probably remember him as the Auburn quarterback, TJ Finley. The last time he faced Alabama, the Crimson Tide needed 4 overtimes to beat Auburn. Do you think that TJ Finley could go in there knowing that he has had success against Alabama, or do you think that Alabama is going to end up beating them by like 4 touchdowns?
Richard. No. He does not have that Auburn defense that was with him that day. I mean, TJ Finley did nothing in that Iron Bowl to make you think, oh, man, he's the reason why Auburn stayed in the football game. I mean, we all know Tank Bigsby didn't run out of bounds. Auburn would have beat them. Let's just talk about that for a second. Would Brian Harsin still be at Auburn if they win that game? I think that's a wild.
So.
That's a wild thing to talk. Well, at least he would have got one more year. I think he at least would have got to finish year 2. Maybe we'll just leave it at that. But I'm glad Alabama's playing Western Kentucky though, because one thing I think we need to find out, and I think Kalen DeBoer needs to find out about his Alabama team, and Kane Womack, defense coordinator. How's Alabama's secondary going to be? They lost a lot of guys from that secondary. A lot of guys hit the portal when Nick Saban left. Caleb Downs was one. Other guys went off to the National Football League. So we know Western Kentucky wants to throw the football. That's what they do. Whoever the quarterback is, they're going to throw the ball around with Tyson Helton as the head coach. So that's going to be, I think that's it's a team Alabama should and will beat. But here's the thing with TJ Finley. He cannot move. He's a target back there. I mean, Alabama's probably going to get a few sacks on. Now, he's big, so maybe they bounce off of him. But, hey, Alabama's not the only in-state school he lost to in his career. He also lost to Detroit Trojans. So I had to throw that in there. But and they beat them pretty good last year too. But yeah, TJ Finley, it's not gonna happen. But my biggest problem with him, he's a statue. He cannot move. But still, it's good for Alabama to play a team that likes to throw the ball, so they can kind of judge some things with the secondary.
Phillip, one of the things that I love about college football, I mean, we've got ranked matchups starting on Thursday. All these teams there in action should end up winning their games comfortably. Oklahoma plays on Friday. We got Missouri playing on Thursday. So we talked about like my favorite matchups. I mean, I don't know about you, Phillip. I'm a huge fan of Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt. That Fox noon kickoff between Penn State and West Virginia. I think that Penn State is going to go into Morgantown and dominate, but I think that Penn State is one of those teams where I see 2 losses on their schedule to Michigan and Ohio State. I mean, that's what Penn State is. That's their identity. They win every single game except Ohio State and Michigan. But is there a team that's not in the SEC that you have got your eye on that you think, yes, this team could shock some people? They could surprise some people and possibly make the college football playoff.
Well, I don't think Michigan's going to be in the playoff. That's number one.
Yeah, they lost a lot of players from the national championship team.
Wisconsin could be a dangerous team. I just don't think Michigan's going to have an offense. I mean, I don't think they're going to be that good. And you talk about Penn State, 2 wins, 2 losses. That gets you in the playoff now.
And Colby Allard. Colby Allard is a good quarterback.
Yeah.
I think
he kind of fell apart to me in those Michigan and Penn State game. I mean, Michigan and Ohio State games. But a team out there that I think could surprise and get to the playoffs that's not in the SEC. So you're really asking me to step outside where I live at. Just looking at it, maybe we get 2 Big 12 teams. Maybe Oklahoma State could be one of those teams. I think Utah's winning the Big 12. I think they're the best team there, especially with Cam Rising. Oklahoma State's a team to look out for. ACC, we talked about them, but if Miami can get past Florida,
there you go.
And Cristobal kind of shake off some of those late game mess ups he has. That's a team that's dangerous because, again, we don't know what we have with Florida State. And here's the deal with Florida State. Everybody wants to jump on DJU for that game on Saturday. That's not all his fault. They don't have receivers that can get down the field. I mean, you lose Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson.
Yeah.
They don't have a down the field threat anymore. Both those guys were down the field threats. They would take over the game. But yeah, so maybe Miami. That's another team we could look out for. Hey, you never know? NC State. I'm really interested to see how Grayson McCall looks with NC State, and it's going to be interesting, right? Going into this year, 12 teams. Somebody's going to get in. We not even expect. I think Wisconsin could be a team. That's going to be a dangerous game for Alabama when they have to go at the Madison.
Well, Phillip, I do think, Auburn is a team that you cover in the Wiregrass area in Alabama. And, they're playing Alabama A&M, but I personally think that Peyton Thorne is going to have to pass for over 300 yards and throw 4 touchdowns. He has got to prove that he is the guy. There should be no question Peyton Thorne is the guy. Because we talked about on previous shows, Auburn could easily go 5-0 before they get into their gauntlet of their schedule. But you've got to trust in your quarterback, and Peyton Thorne has got to show that he is the guy. He's got Jarquez Hunter in the backfield. Cam Coleman is going to make an impact as he is a freshman on this Auburn team. They got some transfers that came in. But what is the realistic expectations for Peyton Thorne running Hugh Freeze's offense?
I've said this to anybody that would ask me. If he is good, if he plays well, Auburn can win 9 games in the regular season, and perhaps if they win the bowl game, get to 10. I don't think he needs to throw for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns on Saturday. I think he just needs to run the offense. The offense just needs to look crisp, clean. Because honestly, I think they need to really get Jarquez Hunter going. They need to get the Auburn run game going early in the year. Of course, they have the Cal matchup, New Mexico and Arkansas. But then I've circled the Oklahoma game as the most important game on the Auburn schedule. But he does need to play well, create some chemistry with the receivers. Look, there's only 2 receivers on this team that were there last year. That is Caleb Burton and Camden Brown. Everybody else is new. You got the transfers, Robert Smith from Georgia State. You've got Keandre Lambert-Smith coming from Penn State. I know people are talking about him. He was probably the top transfer portal receiver out there. You talked about Cam Coleman. Perry Thompson is another. And then I tell you who's the biggest benefactor of all those receivers coming in is Rivaldo Fairweather, because he was the only player Auburn had as a receiver last year. I know he's a tight end, but that could really go up and get the ball. But then teams say, okay, we know this. We will double team him. We will, bracket him or whatever coverage you want to do. And other Auburn receivers could not get up. But Auburn may have had the worst receiving group in the SEC last year. I think talent-wise, they're top 5 now. So they've got the players. I've said this repeatedly. The running backs are there. Damari Alston. Also, then you got Jeremiah Cobb. And let me just say this. it is great news. Brian Battie left the hospital this week uh, using a cane. I mean, it's just a miracle what has happened with him and his recovery. But I just think Auburn needs to blow this team out first half because they do need to get the backup quarterbacks in the game. Hank Brown is listed as number 2 quarterback. Last week on Tiger Talk, Hugh Freeze said that. They need to get him some reps. They need to get Holden Garner some reps. They need to get Walker White some reps because here's the thing. Pate Thorne goes down with an injury, Auburn's in trouble because they have no experience behind him at all. Hank Brown a little bit from the bowl game. Holden Garner, I don't think is a guy. I just have seen people that have been around the team, reporters and stuff say, whenever he gets faced with pressure, he kind of falls apart. He's good on 7-on-7s. They always talk about Holden Garner being the best pure thrower of football on the team, and we've seen it in games. When he gets pressure, he just falls apart. He can't handle it. So they need to get Hank Brown some valuable reps, and this is an opportunity Saturday to do that in the second half. So Auburn needs to come out first half, take care of business, get up 30 or 40 points, so Hugh Freeze can put some backups in there and get some experience for them guys. But yeah, I think that's kind of what I would see with that. Peyton Thorne don't have to throw for a bunch of yards and touchdowns, but just run the offense, run it well, see how efficient the offense runs, and no mistakes.
All right, Phillip, we've already seen a top 10 team go down. Which ranked team this week would you put on upset alert? You got to pick one. Is there a ranked team that is on upset alert for week 1?
All right, let me pull the schedule up so I could
I got the schedule up myself. I've already picked my team.
Okay, let me see here. Richard's putting me on the spot here.
You already mentioned this team. An unranked Florida hosting Miami. Is that really an upset though? Because it's the Swamp.
It's a 2.5. So you're saying a top 10 team be on upset alert this weekend?
So they're playing. If somebody in the top 25 is playing an unranked team, I guess that would be upset alert.
Does Florida State count again? They are playing Boston College on Monday.
Hey, look out for probably one of the best running backs, the former Glenwood Gator, Kyle Robichaux, who's a Doak Walker finalist. I just want to give a shout out to him because he did play for the Glenwood Gators.
So, okay, of course we got the Texas A&M Notre Dame game, but that wouldn't be an upset by the odds makers because they have A&M as a 3-point favorite.
I noticed that, and Notre Dame is ranked 7th. So
then you have West Virginia, Penn State. We'll see what Neil Brown has. I think that's a candidate for it.
It is in Morgantown. If West Virginia is any good, they could possibly win that game.
I'm going to throw one at you. If this comes true, Richard. Somebody, I need to start playing the lottery. Fresno State playing at Michigan.
Fresno State is a sneaky good team. Oh man, Fresno State will sneak up on you. Because nobody expects Fresno State to beat you, but they play tough.
Yes, and here's something. And okay, I already teased this. I've already recorded my show that's going to come out on Wednesday. I did open and I said, Florida State taught us a very valuable lesson this past weekend. We know nothing about these teams. We think we know. I think there's only two teams I think we know that are good, Georgia and Ohio State, just because who they have, especially Georgia with Kirby and all that. Florida State showed us, because let's be honest, on paper, Florida State's more talented than Georgia Tech. I don't think anybody will disagree with that. But look, with the transfer portal error, it's basically like NFL. You have a whole bunch of free agents that have not played together. At least in the NFL, they do get to play preseason games where coaches can at least get a little bit of an idea how these guys gel together. And even Lane Kiffin talked about, like, Ole Miss is an example. Another example is Texas with new receivers, new running backs because of the injury stuff. Alabama, we don't know what they're going to be. Just using some SEC teams as an example. Now, in Michigan, not necessarily the portal, but this is pretty much a new team on offense. How do we know how this whole team's going to gel? And if they're sloppy on offense, that keeps Fresno in the game. And you know how it goes, Richard. When an underdog, the longer they stay in the game, the more confident they get, and more the favorite starts pressing and starts to play not to lose and not to win. No Jim Harbaugh on the sideline anymore. Uh, I just say that's kind of a tricky game there. And I think, and like I said, I think Florida State taught us a lesson. Be cautious about these teams. But the great thing about that is it's a 12-team playoff now, especially if you're in the SEC or the Big Ten. You can now afford a loss or two losses, depending on who they're against, early on in the year if you can go on that run the back half of the season. But still, as soon as the Florida State game was over, I was like, this is a cautionary tale. We do not know these teams as good as we think we do. We know the players that are on the rosters, the depth charts. But with the transfer portal stuff, a lot of these teams are turning over half their roster. We just don't know how good they are until they actually get on the field and play games, and if they're able to play together as a unit.
Phillip, it's always great when you come on the show. I'm just excited that football is back and appreciate you coming on and talking some high school football and some college football. Before I get you out of here, just tell my audience where they can follow you on social media and how they can listen to your podcast.
Just hit me up social media at PJordanSEC. Check out my Facebook page, the Phillip Jordan Sports Facebook page. I post all my podcasts and articles over there. Check out the Wiregrass High School Football Report. Check out Talking SEC. It's a once a week SEC focused podcast. And the Phillip Jordan Show it's been kind of dormant the last few weeks, but we'll have some Troy content on there this week as well.
There you go. Nobody covers the Wiregrass like Phillip Jordan. Phillip Jordan from the Phillip Jordan Show, talking SEC. It's always great having him on the show. That is it for the Sports Beat. Want to thank everybody out there who has watched the show on Facebook Live and on YouTube. Don't forget, you can catch a rebroadcast of the show. I am found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great night, everybody, and we will see you next time.